You're supposed to love yourself. I didn't understand that love was a process of accepting ourselves for who we are. I thought love was something you give to someone else, which is what we're taught. So from that point on, there was a series of very hard learning lessons of surrender and acceptance. So being divinely human, it doesn't mean that you transcend negative thoughts. I think that's a fallacy. I'm never going to have a negative thought. Or when I meditate, I'm going to have no thoughts. I'm never going to have a negative thought. And really, I think that sets us up for failure, because being divinely human means walking as both. We are both. We chose to have a human experience so we could transcend it. We chose to separate from the all to remember we are it. Welcome to Divinely Human, a podcast for starseeds, lightworkers, and those seeking to remember the truth of who they are. I'm your host, Sarah Asher Rose, therapist, channel, and guide for those awakening their divine path. Here, your humanity is sacred, your voice is welcome, and your remembering begins. Let's dive in. In today's episode, we are starting at the beginning of our journey together, starting with the very heart of this podcast, what it means to truly be divinely human. This is a theme I've lived deeply myself. For most of my life, feeling very different from others, I felt the dance of duality. In one moment, being very profoundly connected to the divine, feeling a connection to source beyond words, feeling this profound abundance and love that exists for all of us, while at the same time also struggling with low self-worth, anxiety, feelings of unworthiness, and just the everyday struggles of being a human being. Even now, as someone who's been channeling for over 10 years, channeling light beings, ascended masters, receiving divinely guided messages and codes of light, I have human moments. I have self-doubt. I have highs and lows. I feel sometimes I don't belong, or there are times where I question, am I doing this right? Is this what I should be doing? Or how do I do this? But over time, I've come to realize that this experience isn't about either or, being right or wrong, being human or not human. It's actually about both, that we chose to have a human experience, and that being human doesn't make us less divine. It's actually the gateway to our divinity, and being divine doesn't mean we won't struggle, because there are purpose in our struggles. So every episode, I share a personal story, and this episode, I'm going to share with you the beginning of my awakening. I will say that prior to having a spiritual awakening around 2013, I had always felt very different and very not human, although at the time I didn't understand that. I grew up just simply having a very vivid imagination and feeling so connected to mermaids and dragons, and really never questioning whether any of those things existed. I just had this knowing, this connection, that there's another realm and it's unseen. We can't see it here, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And always had a strong connection to what some call God or the universe. I remember being 16 years old and being in the back of my parents' backyard and asking for a sign, Dear God, if you are real, please show me a sign. And I remember as soon as I said that, the hum of the cicada bugs during the summer. We have those cicadas here on Long Island in August. You can hear them very loudly. They were a very low hum, right? And as soon as I said that, they intensified in sound significantly. So for me, that was enough to feel that there is something that we are connected to, unseen, that connects all things. Again, not having the language for that, but just simply having that knowing. So even though I had this connection and not really fully understand it at the time, in childhood and my teen years, I really struggled in belonging. And I often felt like an outsider, too sensitive, too strange. I felt that other people didn't like me. I felt that no matter what I tried to do, I would always stand out. And I just felt too much for others. So feeling like an outcast, I'm sure that I dimmed my light to fit in because that's what we've been conditioned to do. And really not honoring my intuition, really not understanding what intuition really was. I was in a constant state of seeking the approval of others because every time I had a desire, that desire was questioned by the adults around me. So it really taught me to doubt myself, to doubt my inner voice. Many of us have been taught that. That's not the truth of who we are. We've been taught to doubt that inner knowing, that silent whisper, do this, do that. But there's so much pressure from society to conform to a state of being in this linear path, we lose sight of that, not even aware that we're disconnecting from our divinity. So around 2013, I had a very low point in my life. I was newly divorced and a single mom and sort of ended up in a relationship that was from a place of wanting to be loved. And then realizing that in order to really be who I needed to be, I had to separate myself from that relationship. So around that time, I also quit my job. And there's a saying that, sometimes you need to give up everything, or sometimes you need to accept nothing so that you can be the everything. So with very low points, there's often a spiritual awakening because you're throwing out your old identity. You're accepting that these might be stories. This might not be the truth of who I am. And you're sort of letting all of that go, the tower card moment where you let the old structure, the old stories crumble so you can attune to who you really are. So before I go into the story of my spiritual awakening, I want you to take a moment just to think about those tower moments for you, those moments of death. Those are the moments that you are stepping into or remembering your authentic self. So around that time, I knew that there was more for me, more than, what had presented itself prior in my life, listening to all the adults around me, following that linear path, going to college and sort of ending up nowhere with nothing and understanding that it was inside of me. I started to seek out meditation and, spiritual people like me. And I'll never forget, I had a Reiki session and I remember staring out the window of my room in the wintertime and just really feeling like I was lost. And after that, a series of events happened and I ended up in a spiritual group here on Long Island. And I discovered very quickly that I had these sort of abilities that the people around me didn't seem to have. And I kind of became obsessed with meditation. And being obsessed with meditation, it taught me to really tune into this unseen world. And I could clairvoyantly see it and clairaudiently hear it. And all these gifts ramped up and accumulated into this ability to channel. I had a Reiki 2 attunement. And after that, I started hearing what I call light language. And with that came this ability to channel. And as we come to know each other and you listen to me in these episodes, I will talk more about that experience. But even though I had this grand spiritual awakening, there was a lot to it that I had to process. So around this time, 2013, 2014, 2015, my ability to trans-channel exploded. And I started channeling, and there were a group of people within the spiritual community who were devoted to coming to see me, and they wanted so much to hear from me. I sort of became a star overnight. And while one part of me really enjoyed that, the other part of me was terrified of that. Even after this awakening, when I began channeling messages in groups, I still doubted myself. So I could feel the beings come into me. They would speak through me. But at the same time, I was still having a human experience. Sarah, observing this happening. It was wild. And I would channel for people and slip into this sort of blissful state. Now, whenever I channel, I feel a blend happening. Okay. So I don't feel that I leave consciousness or go somewhere else. It's like my human becomes divine. The divine part of me becomes prominent, and the beings of light that work through me step forward that way. So when that would happen, there was a sort of bliss and joy of feeling the higher dimensions. And that bliss, that joy was, almost the state of ecstasy that when I would come down, I would feel a sort of crash and burn. And I would channel for a group of people and then drive on my way home and think, great, now I have to go back to my life. At the time I lived in my parents' house. I was raising my daughter by myself. I struggled to make money, struggled with my career. I felt lost, stuck, confused. There was a lot of dysfunction in my family. And I just had this sense of sadness after channeling. Like, I have to go back to earth. I didn't know how to be grounded or live in the middle. And I felt this sort of really stark contrast between the version of me that would channel and then my human self. And at the time, I felt that this was an escape for me. I used my connection to escape my problems. And eventually I realized that the healing that I needed to really be where I wanted to be, out of my parents' house, living in my truth, releasing the fear of being judged and seen, really stepping into my gifts, making a difference in the world, sharing my writings with the world. It came from not avoiding these things, not bypassing my humanity, avoiding the pain, but actually by embracing it. So this is what I had to learn, to love the parts of myself, the darkest parts of myself. Right? Those are the parts of you that need the most love. So before I go into today's teaching, I want you to take a moment to ask yourself, what are those parts for you? What is the darkest part of you that fears rejection, that fears abandonment, that feels unworthy? That's the part of you that needs all of your light. And by embracing our humanity, that's how we evolve. That's how we expand into our divinity. So as I started to become clearer channel, it had a lot to do with the inner work that I was doing, of learning how to forgive, learning how to love myself, learning how to reprogram my subconscious mind, learning that I was worthy and that everything that I had manifested or couldn't manifest was a byproduct of my beliefs. And that was a lot of work. And then looking around at the spiritual community and seeing a lot of people avoiding that and understanding that this was the whole purpose of spirituality, alchemy, transformation. So as I started to learn to love the parts of me that feared and doubted and felt pain, my connection to spirit actually deepened. I became a clearer channel, and not because I escaped the human wounds, but because I embraced them. So the core teaching for today really is duality is our teacher. And we transform by not pushing away our pain, pushing away our shadow. We transform by embracing it. This is actually my definition of being divinely human. Real quick, before I dive even deeper into this teaching, I want to share with you that when I was about, 26, 27 years old, I went to the Edgar Cayce Center in New York City, and there was a trance channel there. I went to see her. And at the time, I didn't know what it was. I was just drawn there. Spirit drew me there. And I got to listen to her channel. I had no idea what she was doing. She totally transformed and changed. And as she slipped into a trance, her voice changed, her mannerisms changed. And I was the first person that she came to. And the being, whatever being she was channeling, came to me and pointed at me and said in a loud voice, "You don't love yourself. Your guides are screaming at you to love yourself. It's time." And I just instantly, immediately cried. And I had a thought. I often talk about this when I talk to people. And the thought was, you're supposed to love yourself. I didn't understand that love was a process of accepting ourselves for who we are. I thought love was something you give to someone else, which is what we're taught. So from that point on, there was a series of very hard learning lessons of surrender and acceptance. So being divinely human, it doesn't mean that you transcend negative thoughts. I think that's a fallacy. I'm never going to have a negative thought. Or when I meditate, I'm going to have no thoughts. I'm never going to have a negative thought. And really, I think that sets us up for failure, because being divinely human means walking as both. We are both. We chose to have a human experience so we could transcend it. We chose to separate from the all to remember we are it. In order to do that, you have to embrace both parts of you, both the part of you that can climb the dimensions and experience that connection, and the part of you that fears that at the same time. You have to accept both, to walk both in fear and faith, to accept the love and the fear, all parts of you, because in between is you. To, hear the voice of your ego telling you you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're not good enough, but still choose to trust the other part of you that says you are right where you need to be, you are enough, you are enough, you are enough. To climb in bliss and then to fall into sadness and know that neither one defines you. Overcoming fear isn't really about having no fear. It's choosing to alchemize it, to accept it. That's the only way we can, through acceptance. And our duality really isn't a punishment. It's a teacher. The more we can honor our darkness as much as the light within us, the closer we come to inner peace. Because it's a gift. Our obstacles show us where the light is needed. If we didn't fall down, we wouldn't learn how to get back up. So this process of becoming divinely human isn't about fixing yourself, because you're whole the way that you are. When you start from wholeness, you can pour light upon the parts of you that aren't in wholeness. So this is about remembering that nothing inside of you is broken, that you are perfect, you are whole the way that you are, and there are purpose in your struggles, in your obstacles, to help you remember who you are. You are both the wound and the medicine, the doubt and the divine, the mess and the miracle, and this podcast is an invitation to explore both, week by week. So, I will leave you with this reflection for the week. Where in your life are you holding on to an impossible standard of being spiritually perfect? And what might change in your life if you actually allowed your humanity to be part of your healing? If you think about the darkest part of you, what would happen instead of running from that part or trying to protect that part, that you actually accepted it? And through your acceptance, were able to transform it. Maybe write about it, sit with it, or speak it out loud. Your humanity is not a distraction from your divinity. It is actually the gateway to it. Thank you for joining me this week. In next week's episode, I'll share a powerful channel transmission from my galactic library called A Return to Remember. This message holds ancient wisdom about why we forget who we are and how we return to remember, and how that is the key to our ascension. I will see you then. Until next time, keep remembering that you are divinely human. Thank you for listening to Divinely Human. If this episode resonated with your soul, please subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who's on this path of awakening. You can find more offerings, sound codes, and soul support at sarahasherose.com or on Instagram at sarahasherose. Until next time, stay open, stay soft, and stay divinely human.